Thanksgiving is 1 week away. That's just enough time to get our facts straight. I'm John Stonestreet. Welcome to the 2-Minute Warning. When it comes to this holiday called Thanksgiving, I'm convinced that a lot of Americans just don't get it. And I'm convinced of that for 3 reasons. First is what happens in classrooms all across America in the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving. The politically correct, washed-down curriculum about who the Pilgrims were and what they did misses the real point. It misses the real story about who the Pilgrims were and what they were really about. Secondly is what happens on Thanksgiving Day itself, where we spend our day gouging ourselves with food and watching a lot of football and then preparing for the big sales that are the next day. But probably the clearest evidence that Americans don't get Thanksgiving is what happens on Black Friday, the day after. I mean, listen, nothing says we're thankful like fighting each other and beating up security guards and wresting goods out of each other's hands just because it's a sale that we can't refuse. Our definitions of gratefulness and thankfulness need a big correction. One way to get that correction is to go back and ask, who were the Pilgrims? Why did they do what they did? The Pilgrims were a group of people in England called the Separatists. They were called that because they separated from the Church of England to worship God according to their conscience. But they experienced so much persecution that they fled England and they went to Holland. In Holland, they found the religious freedom, but they didn't find the economic opportunity they needed to support their families. And more than that, they were extremely concerned about the influence of the Dutch culture on their teenagers. You can read about this if you read William Bradford's book of Plymouth Plantation. Bradford began writing his memoirs when he was just 17 years old in Holland with the rest of the Separatists. And then he continued writing them throughout the time that he became the governor of Plymouth Plantation once they got to the New World. So the Separatists decided to try the New World. And though they had planned to settle far south in Virginia, they ended up north in a place we now know, of course, as Plymouth, Massachusetts. And we know the story. We know the story of that terrible first winter that they endured. Lots of sickness. Half the crew died. We know the story of Squanto, who was providentially sent to help them grow corn and bring food to them. And we also know the story that after they survived, they decided to celebrate. Now, many history books say that's all it was. It was a celebration. But that's not what it was. These pilgrims realized that they had survived because of the kindness of God. And they wanted to thank Him. They called a day of thanksgiving. And it wasn't to thank the Native Americans, although they owed a lot to them. It was to thank God, who preserved them through an entire winter and was setting them on a new course for a new society and a new nation. There's lots of things we can learn from the pilgrims, but I think the key thing that I want to learn in my life is that this world doesn't belong to me. I'm a part of a world that belongs to someone else, someone who is far greater than I am. I'm not entitled to anything. I'm not owed stuff. I'm not owed Black Friday sales, and I'm not owed a lot of turkey one day a year. I owe God whatever good things are in my life. This is something the Pilgrims realized. In fact, this is something that William Bradford wrote in Of Plymouth Plantation. They knew they were pilgrims and strangers here below, and looked not much on these things, but lifted their eyes up to heaven, their dearest country, where God hath prepared for them a city. So this Thanksgiving, thanks be to God. For the 2-Minute Warning, I'm John Stonestreet.